If you work in university maintenance, Granger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Granger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRANGER, visit Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
We optimize hydration, movement, supplements, and sleep, but most people completely ignore the air they're breathing. And when your air is off, your body feels it first. The Blue Signature Air Purifiers by Blue Air quietly remove airborne pollutants, odors, smoke, and allergens, supporting deeper sleep, better recovery, and clearer focus. It's the most customizable air purifier you can get, with exclusive accessories designed to fit your space and your style. Visit blueair.com and use code SIGNATURE30 to elevate your wellness routine.
There are heroes and there are legends. Heroes come and go. Legends never die. We usually say that you cannot become a legend before death. These are living legends. If the legends fall silent, who will teach the children of our ways? Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 5, brought to you by Titan Sensor, is proud to present The Legends. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sports for the next 4 seasons on Sun Coaches Podcast. Titan GPS delivers technological superiority and improved player performance through wearable GPS made for high school football and strength and conditioning. From speed training to athlete recruit to workload enhancement, Titan is the easy-to-use yet comprehensive GPS tool to get it done. There's no minimum to get started, and Titan will walk you through every step to success. Message us on X at Titan Sensor to learn more and get in touch. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 5, The Legends. And today I have a legend. He's won 3 consecutive state championship games. He's the son of a coach, Bowdon's head coach, Coach Rich Fendley. Thanks for being on with me.
Well, thank you for having me, Coach Lamb. And, I don't know about a legend. Sometimes I think timing is everything. And I think I hit Bowdon at the right time with the right kids and the right coaching staff.
Well, Coach, you grew up in Warner Robins, right? Well, I mean, you're a coach's kid, so you probably grew up all over the place, but that's where you played high school ball, right?
Yeah, well, fortunate for me, my dad's journey was he was 3 places and done. And when I was born, I'll back up. He started at Cherokee High School up in Canton, spent 2 years there and didn't win a lot of football games. Took the job at Baldwin County, was there for 2 years, and then I was actually born in Baldwin County, and looked around at what was the best school system down there, and Warner Robins was a good school system, and Robert Davis got the job when I was 1 year old, and he took the defensive coordinator's job at Warner Robins. So from there, my dad stayed there for 30-something years. So I grew up a Demon. That's all I knew. That's all I wanted to be. I couldn't wait to put the R logo on my helmet. I couldn't wait to get a camp T-shirt. So for me growing up, I thought that a high school coach was the greatest job on the planet. I watched my dad. I watched those coaches. They took kids year after year and made football players out of kids that, weren't very talented at times. They had very talented teams, but I thought on Friday night that my dad had the greatest job in America because I got to do what no other kid got to do. I got to be the ball boy until I was a freshman in high school.
So you were the typical coach's kid, gym rat.
I was.
Chase you off the field,
I was at practice. Yes, I was at, I went up to the school on Saturdays. I rode the bus to every away trip. I can remember every away trip, my dad would come home, pick me up. He'd always stop and he'd stop at Hardee's and he would get him a coffee and he would get me a Coke and a chocolate chip cookie. And, I just couldn't wait to get there and throw the football around in the pregame warm-ups and, watch every play, every long run, every hard hit. And knew from an early age, man, this is what I want to do when I grow up.
Well, did you play anything else in high school, or were you just a football player?
Well, I joke all the time. I tell everybody all the time, I really wasn't very good at any sport, but I was above average at all of them. So I played about everything, even at a big school. I played basketball as a 9th and 10th grader. I did track all 4 years. I was a shot put discus guy and got lucky enough to be a region champion in the shot put my senior year. I played baseball for a little bit. I think I hung it up in 9th grade and really became a football track specialist from that point of view.
And you got the opportunity to play at West Georgia after high school, or did you go somewhere before that?
No, I went to West Georgia, and that's one of the greatest decisions of my life, because that staff at that time was made up of a bunch of guys who went on to become great college coaches. Glenn Spencer was the guy that recruited me, and even though they were 1-10, I decided to commit and go to West Georgia because I felt really good about him as a person. And of course, he went on to, be the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. He was at Georgia Tech for a while. He was at Charlotte for a while. I think he had a stint at Florida Atlantic University for a little bit, and then Charlie Fisher was on that staff, and I thought the world of him. He went on to coach at Vanderbilt, went on to coach at NC State. He was a head coach at Richmond for a while, Northern Illinois, not Northern Illinois, but one of those Western Illinois schools, one of the smaller D1 schools. But he kind of, ended up at Arizona State and Penn State for a little bit. Muschamp was on that, not Muschamp, I'm losing my brain right now. Bohannon. Brian Bohannon was on that staff at one time, went on to start Kennesaw State. Used to hang out with him as I was a senior player, and he was a graduate assistant working at West Georgia, but that's where he got his start. David Dean, who went on to, coach at Valdosta State, win some championships, and came back to West Georgia, and he's down in South Georgia now at Lanier County. And that list goes on and on. We had a lot of coaches on that staff who became great coaches, and one of the best decisions of my life, because not only did I get to play in a program that became successful by my senior year, but I felt like those guys helped me in becoming a coach. Just watching those guys, the energy they had, what they had to do to turn West Georgia around from a program that struggled at the Division II level. Getting them to where they were a top 10 team. And of course, right after I graduated, my brothers came in and won a couple of conference championship rings. I didn't get any of those things, but it was a fun experience.
And you played with a bunch of guys that y'all all ended up being coaches too. There's a pile of y'all that played there that ended up being high school
there
coaches.
May be about 20 guys on that staff coaching right now. To name a few, Josh Lovelady. He's up at Mill Creek, won a state title 2 years ago. Andy Dyer, started the Archer program, and he's now the head coach at Elbert County. Coach Spoon down at Westside Macon, played on that team. Brian Lane, who was at Archer with Andy for a long time. He's got a private school job now. I think he's an O-line coach and strength coach at Athens Academy. John Smalls over at East Coweta. Tim Barron, a guy that I worked with for about 9 years at Heard County. I think the world of him. Learned a lot of football from him. Learned a lot about running a program from him as well. He was there with us. There's Danny O'Rourke, who is currently coaching at I know he was at Navy for a little bit. I'm trying to remember if he's at Navy or Tech, but he's been coaching college football since being through. Roberto Pinella is coaching at the Citadel right now. So there are a lot. That's probably half of those guys.
Yeah, Chad Bennett was with y'all too, wasn't he?
Chad and
his brother
and Craig both were with us. The two Bennetts. Chad Walker, who coached. He was at Stars Mills for a while. Was there. Jay Coughlin over at Eastside. He played on those teams, and man, I saw a lot of behind the scenes on these guys before they became high school coaches. And of course, they could probably say the same about me. But
that's just cool though that a bunch of y'all, all ended up being high school coaches and giving back, what you guys learned and what you all went through at the college level. That's just neat to me that so many of y'all ended up, coaching.
Yeah, there's probably 25 off that team, if not more. And I tell people all the time, one of the reasons, a struggling D2 program ended up, catching fire and winning some conference championships and making the playoffs. That one of the reasons it happened was, those coaches at the time recruited the right high school kids. They weren't recruiting, 3 and 4 star kids and big name kids. They were finding kids that just loved football, that had a lot of winter in them, had a lot of, do the little things right. Some really overachievers. I don't think any of us were great football players, but, we worked really hard and we did things the right way and tried to work hard for our coaches in college. And, it's like you said earlier, we were talking off the podcast, you get kids doing the right things and you get them stronger and you can be successful. They recruited the right type of kids.
Ain't no doubt about that. That's the key right there, is getting everybody pulling in the right direction. And one question I've always asked everybody, and you've already answered it, was, when you got to college, did you know you wanted to be a coach? Well, you knew from an early age you wanted to do that. So what was your first job coming out of, did you ever think you wanted to be a college coach, or did you know you were going to be a high school coach?
No, I never thought, anything about college. My dad had some opportunities to go coach some college football, and he always said he didn't want to, be in a situation where he had to move around a lot. So I think that kind of scared me off. But it's funny you say that, because I remember my college teammates kind of picking at me and making fun of me because I was probably the only freshman that was playing football that knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. Most people kind of mess around in college for 2 years and then figure it out. But I knew. And so whenever I got through playing my senior year, I still had, about a year left of school to go. So I remember going over and introducing myself to Ben Scott at Carrollton and telling him, who I was, who my daddy was, and said, I know I want to get into coaching in the fall. And I don't know if I guess I can share this story because it happened 30 years ago, but my academic advisor at West Georgia assigned me to another school to student teach. And I remember telling Ben this, and he said, it's going to be mighty hard for you to coach here and help us if you're over at that other school. He said, let me see if I can work something out. And then he made a phone call to West Georgia. And the next thing I knew, I was student teaching at Carrollton High School. So he had some pull back in those days. And so I was fortunate to get to coach a year with him. And, he was one of the most unique, different guys I've ever been around, as a coach. And, I only got to spend 1 year with him, but I was at Carrollton in 1995. Got to coach defense, and at one point during the year, and this is not typical of your modern 2025 coach, but he came to me in the middle of the year and said, hey, our middle school is struggling a little bit. He said, would you mind going down and like calling the defense and run the defense and be our middle school defensive coordinator? And man, I thought, in my mind, that was a promotion from helping being the assistant varsity's tackles coach to being the DC. And, I was like, heck yeah, I'll go down there and do it. So I did that. And when the middle school season finished, he brought me back up, and I helped Nelson Hall with the defensive line, and had an awesome, it was a fun year. And at the end of that year, I was graduating. They didn't have a coaching slot or a history slot at Carrollton High School. And I remember Ben, telling me, he said, Ben, you've done a great job, and you're a hard worker, and, you're going to be good at this. And he said, I'm going to make some phone calls if you'll let me know to some people and help you get a job. And I ended up going to.
Performance comes down to controlling what you can. For tennis pro Jessica Pegula, that means starting with the air around her. She can't control her opponent or the match, but she can control her rest and recovery. That's why she's trusted Blue Air for 5 years and counting. Blue Signature air purifiers are engineered to perform and designed to impress, with 7 stages of advanced filtration, up to 10 times more odor removal, and customizable colors and accessories. Shop blueair.com and use code signature30 to save.
Troup County High School in 96 the next year, and was there from 96 to 2000.
Well, who was the head coach at Troup County when you went there?
For the first 2 years, it was Rob Ridings, and I learned a whole lot from Rob Ridings. He's had a great career. Didn't at Troup at that time. I think we had one good year, and then 2 that didn't. But he's a prime example of what I think about high school football. I think there's the right fit for the right coach. Not every school is a fit for you, because he went on to, been at Glenn Academy, been at Thompson, been at Prince Avenue, and then he's won a lot of football games, and he had won it with Grange. So learned a lot. I learned how to work from him. He was one of the hardest working guys I've ever been around. Put in a lot of hours, and I was very fortunate that was my first experience, because everybody back in the 90s would tell you, who you coach for the first few years is going to determine, what kind of worker you are, how you're going to turn out. And I learned how to work. And then I was there 1 year with Bubba Jeter, and learned a lot from Bubba. So he was the head coach my last year, and then Tommy Walburn joined that staff. So it was really an up and coming, really good staff, and probably would have stayed there a little longer.
Y'all had some dudes on that staff.
We did, and I probably would have been there a little bit longer, but a death in the family kind of brought me back to Carroll County, the next year. And I really, really, really didn't want to leave Tommy Walburn. I thought the world of him the 1 year I got to coach with him. And, man, he kind of got me rejuvenated a little bit the year he was there. We were really good on defense that year. And I'll tell you, he told some of the greatest stories I've ever heard in my life. I could sit there and listen to him talk forever. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite guys. I remember one year we were up at the clinic, and me and him and Rock Graziano and some other people were sitting over there, and we were not arguing, but we were clinicking on a mirror about 8-man defense and how we lined up the trips. And me and Tommy were speaking the same language, and Rock was trying to do, he was doing something different. And it was, Tommy just kept looking at me. He'd wink at me, and I was like, okay, I must kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit, because if Tommy understands what I'm saying, I can't be too far off. It was. I learned a lot from those two guys, just sitting in the room at the clinic on a mirror with grease marker, bouncing ideas off each other. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was a little sad when I left, because Tommy had just gotten there. I'd been there 3 or 4 years, and really enjoyed coaching with him. Learned a lot of football with him, and he was in the point of learning. I remember when I left, the farewell was, he said, "Man, we've let the game of football pass us by. Everything was becoming spread. Everything was 4 wides and trips, and we were about to go to clinics and learn." What we could do in the secondary on the back end to start combating some of this stuff. We had been a directional defense. We'd been battling the wing T, for the first 4 or 5 years that I'd been coaching. And all of a sudden, you've got 3 or 4 teams on your schedule who they're not pulling and kicking. They're in a spread and they're slinging it around. And, that was our big thing. The game had passed us by, and we were going to go try to catch up a little bit.
So where'd you end up after Troup?
So when I left Troup, I took a job at Villa Rica High School with Keith Bird. He had just gotten that job. My first wife was from Carrollton, so I'd been in Carrollton, playing at West Georgia. So I liked Carrollton, and there was a lot of good football around that area. So I ended up at Villa Rica, and the 2 years I was there, man, great kids, and man, it was a fun coaching staff. we didn't win many football games. I think we were 2-8 and 3-7. But again, I joined a staff with a lot of good young coaches. I liked Keith Bird, but on that staff was a young Biff Parsons, who was up at Rockmart, and just done a tremendous job there. We had a running backs coach named Stacy Nobles, who went on to be the head coach down at West Lawrence. And I think he's down with Coach Laster at Bleckley County right now as the strength coach. But he was kind of a rookie, just getting into coaching. Coached a year with Chris Edwards, who ended up down at Heard County. So we kind of connected there and at Heard County later on down the line. But had a coaching change at VR, which kind of led me to my first DC job. We had a coaching change after the second year, and I was just one of those guys that, I wanted to be somebody's hire, somebody's guy. I didn't want to be a holdover, So when I met with the new coaches, I told them I was going to, kind of look around. And Rob Cleveland, and I know you probably know Rob from VR, and he had just gotten the head job at Alexander, and he had come to Troop after I left. And so he kind of brought some Troop guys up. David Thrower came up to Alexander. So, I decided I was going to go, and he offered me the DC job. And, man, I was pumped. Couldn't wait to get there. Couldn't wait to, have that title. And man, you don't know what you don't know until you have to do it. So I'll tell that to anybody listening right now. When you think you know enough football to be a DC, to be a head coach, you find out real quick how much you don't know. But went there, and I'll tell you, I tell people all the time, it's probably the one job that I had that I learned the most football, and it was because we were not very talented. We were playing in the biggest classification that there was in Georgia at that time, and then we also had a 10-game region schedule, so you couldn't go out and schedule a win. We had Woodward Academy in the region. Douglas County was in the region. Creekside was in the region. Sandy Creek was in the region. It was, you were playing against D1 kids about every week. And so Rob was there 2 years. And then after that second year, he stepped down and he ended up taking the Villa Rica job. And, about half that staff went with him to VR. And I was wanting to make that move to VR. And the principal at the time came to me and offered me the Alexander job. And, I wanted to, again, you think you know what you're doing. You think you know way more than you do. And I took that job, and I have no regrets on it, because if you didn't coach and you didn't scheme and you didn't out-coach people, you were going to get beat by 42 points a game. And, we were proud. We kept a lot of games 21-14 or, 35-21. We played some 17-14 games, knowing that we were not as talented as the people we were playing, but we had to scheme to keep it close, and really, really learned a lot of football doing that. And then got to coach with some great characters up there. I'd coached with David Thrower at Troop. We got reconnected, and I love David Thrower. He may be the greatest human being on the planet. You talking about an honest, great guy who would give you the shirt off his back. I've always loved DT, and I'm very thankful, to Rob Cleveland giving me my first opportunity, to call the defense. And look, that's a whole funny story in itself. I'm going to rewind for a minute, because when I took the job at Troop, my very second job, I was hired as the O-line coach. Rob Ridings had hired me as an O-line coach. And my dream, Coach Lamb, was to be the greatest O-line coach in the history of Georgia high school football. It wasn't to be a head football coach. I wanted to be an O-line coach. And then he ended up hiring DT at the same time. And I remember the week before we were going to start practice, he came and sat us both down and said, hey, I can't have but one O-line coach. He said, one of you's got to go to defense. And, man, I had my dreams, and I wanted to be an O-line coach. And I remember him talking to both of us. And neither one of us looked at each other and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to D." And I remember Rob looking at me and said, "Hey, I think your personality is better suited, to coach defense." I said, "I think DT's more of an O-line guy." And, I was brought up to do whatever makes the team better. Play me wherever you want to, coach. So I agreed to do it and fell in love with defense. And I've never coached offense in my career. Never
That's crazy.
did. And, that dream went down, and I started thinking, man, why did I play that side of the ball? Man, that side of the ball, man, that sucks. It's not even fun. Defense is fun. And fell in love with it, and I was like, golly, what was I thinking? Driving the sled every day at practice and just blocking people when I could have been, wrong arm and bending and tackling. So fast forward back, I was pumped to coach with DT again and be on the same staff with him. At Alexander. So, but after my second year at Alexander as the head coach, I had some personal issues and went through a divorce and, took a year off from football. And a lot of people don't know that. I had at the time, a 3-year-old son and, there's two things on the planet, I guess, that I want to be better at than being a football coach. And that's being an awesome husband and being an awesome daddy. And, I had a 3-year-old boy that I felt like was more important than football, and went through a big, custody battle so that I could remain a daddy, and took a year off from football. I actually took a history job teaching just history at Temple High School, and did that for a year. And then, of course, went down to Hurd the very next year as the strength coach and the tight ends coach. So I guess I lied to you. I've coached 1 year of offense. Tim Barron had to create a spot for me. I coached one guy, tight ends, and we ran the triple option. So all I was doing was teaching him the down block. So I was very thankful, though. I was back in coaching and getting to run the weight room, and man, that was a great job. Great place. I spent 9 years there, coached tight ends for 1 year, and then went to the defensive side of the ball. I kind of went from linebackers to outside backers and, whatever they needed there, and just fell in love with that school system and that place. It was probably the first place I'd ever been that did everything right, from a administrative, from a, athletics was important as academics. You could tell that by the facilities, the way the strength program was run across the board. I just thought, man, this is the way it should be everywhere. Any coach looking for a job, if it doesn't look like this from the outside, it's probably not worth taking. And so, I coached with some really good guys there, the Curbo brothers. And I look up to those guys. And, Tim Barron was a college teammate of mine. And now Shane Laster, who's the head coach there, he was a great guy to work with. He did the D-line for us there. Just fun. We won a lot of weightlifting state titles. And that's really where, we kind of developed what we're doing at Bowdon now, was from that stint there. So very, very fun 9 years, and almost got to the point where, I fell into a deep sleep there. Everything was so good. Friday nights was fun. The coaching staff was great. And, then I messed up and got married to my second wife, and she was a coach. My second wife, her maiden name was Jan Floyd. She was the head basketball coach at LaGrange High. And when I married her, after about 9 months, she started getting on me about, man, she said, don't take this the wrong way, but you do a great job at what you do, man. The kids love you. You're good in the weight room.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
A good defensive coach. She said, but God has made you for such a bigger purpose. You know, you should be out there running a program somewhere, doing exactly what Tim Barron did at Hurd, and you should be building someplace into a winner. And that ate at me for about a year. And after that year, you know, I decided, hey, it's time to go do it. And I sat down with Tim Barron and said, hey, this is my dream now. This is my goal. I want to do it. And if I fail, I fail. If I don't, I don't. And so you know, I ended up having to get coordinator back on my name. So I took the defensive coordinator's job at Westside Macon with Spoon Risper. Did that for a year, and just everything opened up. The Bowdon job opened up, and I got to go interview for it, and I got it. So I was very blessed. Probably didn't have the resume to get it. And I'm going to be honest with you, Coach Lamb, when I did get that job, you know, I got destroyed on social media. Because my head coaching record at the time was 2-18, and man, I got destroyed. Just man, my wife saw it, my kids saw it, and that was my welcome to Bowdon. And dang, if I didn't go in there thinking man, it's been 15 years since I was a head coach. I've worked for great guys. I got it all figured out. And I'll be danged if I didn't go 1-9 again, year one at Bowdon. So my first 3 years coaching, I'm 3-27. How does that sound? So anyway, you know, I'm 3-27, and I'm sitting there questioning a lot of things. You know, at this point, man, am I not cut out for this? Am I, you know, is this too big a job or responsibility for me? But fortunately, I had a good group of coaches, very supportive administration, and the right kids were in middle school. And the next football season, in 2019, we were the number 2 team in the state of Georgia at Bowdon until we got knocked out of the playoffs, round 2. And then year 3, we were a round 2 exit again. And then year 4, we thought we had a really, really good team and thought we had a shot, you know, to play deep. And we were 10-1, and we played a 6-6 not early county, but Turner County team, and thought, man, they're 6-6. You know, we're about to finally get in the quarterfinals, and Turner came up here and beat us unmercifully. And that's when I learned the difference between North Georgia football and South Georgia football. Their 6 losses had come to Irwin County, Fitzgerald, Brooks County, Clinch County. They had played a bunch of world beaters and had gotten better. And, you know, we hadn't. So from that point on, our first 3 games of the year have been top 10, top 5 teams, world beaters. Our scrimmages, you know, we've tried to play people who play for state titles. And finally, in that 5th season, you know, we found a way to get out of round 2. And we had been telling our kids, if we can just get to the quarterfinals, we'll have a chance to go win one. And we ended up winning it in 22, and we turned around and won it in 23 and 24 as well. So, so it looks like I know what I'm doing, but, you know, I tell people all the time, you know, that start was 3-27.
Yeah, it's like Lee Campbell when he started out 0-30 at Montgomery County, and people were like, "Oh my God!" And then he goes to Hawkinsville, and yeah, maybe it wasn't him. You know, maybe that wasn't the problem. You know.
Yeah, you know, you learn a lot, you know, and it's crazy because if you take this year out of it, and I tell people all the time, you know, I was 3-27 in the first 3 seasons I coached, but the 22 and 23 season alone, you know, it was reversed. You know, we were 27-3, you know, at Bowdon. So, you know, and it just comes to, you know, if you think you know what you're doing and you've got a plan and you're being intentional, you just got to stick to your guns and get everybody to buy in. You know, we're not doing a whole lot different than we did year 1 and 2. You know, we got a few different Jimmys and Joes, but you know, you had to change the culture a little bit where we were, And it was the right job at the right time. There was talent coming in the middle school, and I knew we had to survive a year or two, and I thought it was going to be a really good job. I had no idea that it would be one of the best jobs in the state of Georgia.
Well, you talked about your background and your love of the weight room, and we talked off air about how much you idolized Coach Tomberlin and what he did with his strength program all those years at Washington County, and how you kind of modeled some of your stuff after what he did. And I know I'm not saying this to pick at you at all, because I was firmly in your corner when that moron on social media came after you about your death by squats thing, because, you can say whatever you want to, but it works. And that seems to be one of the cornerstones of your program, is really getting those kids bought in the weight room.
Yeah, we do some dinosaur stuff. And, that's one thing, and I told you off air, I think there's about 500 different ways you can do the weight room, and it's going to work as long as you're consistent at what you do. There's not a whole lot you can do with 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that won't get them stronger if they're just consistent. I'll never criticize anybody else's program, because I know there's a million ways to do it. But I do want to give credit where credit's due. Coach Tomberlin down at Washington County had no idea the impact and the influence he had on me as a young coach. Watching them win all those weightlifting state titles, watching all the heavyweight their kids could lift. And, he got me hooked on every piece of literature. A lot of this was the internet was really new. You couldn't just go search stuff up. You had to go, find magazines. You had to go talk to people. And he got me hooked on the bigger, faster, stronger. And I've told him this, I attribute a lot of the success that either me or our staff has had in the weight room along the way to what he did. He got me hooked on that stuff, and all I did was read about it and, learn how to motivate kids to do it. So he kind of got me hooked on being a strength guy. And then the guy that I want to give some credit to as well is Tim Barron. When I got hired at Hurd as the strength coach, I remember him telling me this. He said, "Hey, the weight room is yours except for one thing." He said, "One thing, it's a non-negotiable for me, and we're going to do it. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be my strength guy." And he said, "We're going to squat clean. When we clean, we're going to catch it in the hole. We're going to squat it up. We're not going to do these high cleans. We're not going to have bad elbows, bad knees. Kids, about to tear an ACL." And I said, "Man, that's done. I can do that." And the 9 years I worked with him, one of the biggest discussions we ever had was, we were sitting in his office one day, and he said, "Coach, what can we do, to make this where kids want to come in this weight room every day, that they are smiling to see us, they love it." He said, we've got to keep it hard, but we've got to make it fun." And that's kind of where the death by squats originated. We would act like it was the worst thing on the planet to do, and it is pretty hard to do, but we made it fun. We made it where we would, write a kid's name on the board if he failed, so nobody wanted their name on the board. We came up with a bell that we would ring if you could successfully complete your sets each week. And really the culture just became just amazing in the weight room. And all of a sudden you got kids that are enjoying being there. They're wanting to show up every day. Nobody missed the summer workouts. And then all of a sudden you start seeing results where kids are not only just getting really strong, but that buy-in, they're getting mentally tough. They're becoming physical kids that like to hit on Friday night. So we added some more stuff. We started doing Iron Red Devil competitions, where our Iron Red Devil gets his picture on the wall, gets a T-shirt. We honored our, weight champ as the overall strongest kid in the program. Then, we started entering the weight meets, and, we would tell our kids, "Hey, if you go win a state title, we're going to buy you a ring." So that culture just kind of took off and became what it is. So I really owe a lot to Coach Tomberlin down at Washington County when he was there, and then Tim Barron at Hurd. And, we've just kind of brought a combination of all of that. And you were talking about that earlier, just meshing different programs that you came across when you were a strength coach and doing the weight room. So we just meshed all that together, and, that's what we've got at Bowdon right now. And, I don't care anybody who says, hey, what you're doing is ancient history. It doesn't work anymore. Our kids are what we want them to be. They're mentally tough. They're bigger. They're stronger. They're faster. And they love coming to the weight room. We were on winter break today, and our kids that are going to the weight meet all showed up at 10 o'clock to lift weights together. Just an awesome culture.
And that's all that matters. I mean, ultimately,
yes,
everybody else can sit down and color. I mean, you do what works for you and your kids.
Well, whenever we got those negative responses to our video, which was really a motivational video for our players, it wasn't really intended.
It wasn't like you were selling something.
And
buy my latest video.
Yes. Look, I hope people don't do it. I hope they look at it and say that is done. Look, there are some teams down in South Georgia. If they start doing it, we probably can't beat them. I'm just going to be honest. If the right schools get a hold of it, their kids become mentally tougher and a little bit bigger and stronger. They're already big and strong.
Coach, I got tickled a couple of years ago because, it was probably about 10 years ago, because I'm a dissertation away from a doctorate in kinesiology. Went to medical school. I got a working knowledge of how all of that works. And 10 years ago or so, I had come up with something, and it was like you said, I meshed together stuff that you can see work. And it was every 6 weeks we'd do something different. So like the first 6 weeks we do like the big five, like everybody used to do. So we do, big five, heavyweight, low reps, do that. And then we'd test, measure, and then we'd go 6 weeks of 3x7s. It was very fast, very lightweight, high reps, very fast. Just go fast as you can go. And then we'd measure again. Then we'd do another 6 weeks. Anyway, we do all this stuff, and then lo and behold, 10 years ago, somebody comes out with a study that says the best way for you to gain, better gains and all this other stuff is muscle confusion. Well, people have been doing it for years. People been doing muscle confusion. They just called it something else.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, there's a million different ways to skin the cat. Just do what works for your kids and what they believe in and what works for them.
Yes, I think you do what works for your kids, your program, your philosophy. And, if it works, it works. And we've got a lot of results, and I'll be the first to admit I'm probably not the biggest science-based guy. I'm a results-based guy.
Yeah.
I want the results, and not saying I don't care about kids, and not saying I don't want to learn, because I've turned my weight room over to somebody better than me. And that was really, really hard for me to do, because, I've always thought that, I was one of the best guys in the strength business. But I've got a guy named Blake Morgan right now who programs all our stuff. And I passed the torch off to him 2 years ago, and because I wanted to keep him. I knew he was going to be a great football coach. And I said, look, this is your baby. And I told him the same thing Tim Barron said to me. You can do whatever you want, but we're going to squat clean. He does a great job in our weight room now.
When you talked about, what it is you want, I remember in 2001, I was at Burke County, and Luther Welsh was still at Thompson. And I used to tell people back then, I'm like, their kids don't look right. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look at them. Their butts are enormous and their legs are enormous, but their upper bodies are not. They don't look right. They're funny looking. They're shaped like, this isn't sexist, but they're shaped like women. Like, they don't have broad shoulders.
Tyler Reddick here from 2311 Racing. Another checkered flag for the books. Time to celebrate with Chumba. Jump in at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. CT&Cs. 21 plus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
The narrow hips like a man. They had narrow shoulders and big hips and big legs. But that's what they wanted, because they were running Power Wing T, and they would get low and they would knock your face off and run through your soul. and they all wore those McDavid knee braces on both knees. They had both knees. They'd stay low, and they would drive you out of there. And they were so strong in their lower body that they were just – and then, we were in the same region with Buzz Busby and that bunch down there in Statesboro, and they looked the same way. They were so much stronger than everybody else. And they're putting 4 on the floor in a 4-point stance, run the wishbone, and they just run right. They take care of you to the goal line, drop you off, and tell you, I'll be right back in just a second. We're going to take this ride again. But, that's what they wanted. That's what they were building their kids for their that system.
Was their goal. Yes. Look, I agree with you. Right now, if I name the most physical teams that we played against, I can promise you they all have great strength programs. You can't line up and just, knock people off the ball and mash people if you're not doing things right in the weight room. And there's a correlation. Your more physical teams are usually your teams with, that are lifting weights the right way. Whatever program they're using, they're lifting the right way.
It makes a difference. You pick up heavy things, you get stronger and you get tougher. And you talked about it earlier, your first state championship team in your second year and your third year. And we talked about leadership, and you developed leadership in the weight room. And you said this next year coming up, you probably have some of the best leadership that you've had in your last 3 years.
Yes. All 4 of our teams, our seniors right now have won 3 state championships. And,
they don't know anything else.
They don't know anything else. And really no kid in our program at this point knows anything else. We haven't lost a playoff game. There's not a kid in our program that's ever lost a playoff game right now. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that to say this. The 22 team, when you look back, was probably the most overall talented team that we had. And we were really good that year. The next year, we were really, really good on defense. I think we had 41 takeaways throughout the season. We were not as explosive and as good on offense, but we won it with a great defense. And then last year, the third one, we were not as talented on defense. I think we had 19 takeaways all year. We just weren't as good as we were the year before. And I really had concerns on if we were good enough to win it with our defense. And then offensively, we were the best we had been all 3 years. So, using the strengths the right way. And this year's bunch, I don't know what they're going to be yet, but I know that their leadership right now is the best of all 4 years. And we've been, telling them that in the off-season workouts and in the weight room. So you hope that kind of propels them to have a shot to go do it because they have something better than the previous 3 teams.
So what are some things over the years that in the high school game that you've seen that have changed since you got in it in 95 that is just so much different than it used to be, that's a good thing, bad thing, or just observations that you've noticed that the game's just changed so much as far as high school football goes?
Yeah, the first thing, is some scheme stuff. I remember the first year I ever coached, I would think in our 10-game regular season schedule, 9 of those teams were wing T teams. So you ran the wing T. I remember we'd have to change our read keys up on defense so that the team from the week before wouldn't see, you couldn't figure out what we were keying on. So that's one big change because now I think last year we played 2 wing T teams all year in the regular season. Everybody's going to sniffer backs and spreading it out. And, every now and then you'll see a single wing team. So that's probably, one of the biggest differences there. Another big difference is I think more people do the right stuff in the weight room now. Back when Tomerlin was this bigger, faster, stronger, there were fewer teams that had great strength programs. I think now if you look across the state of Georgia, it's pretty evident. You get on Twitter and you look, everybody's, I would say 80 to 90% of the teams are doing things the right way in the weight room. And then, of course, I think your biggest difference is just players and coaches being a little more transient now than they used to be. You were talking before we got on the air about, guys getting head jobs in their 20s and staying somewhere at the same school for 30 and 40 years. The guy that was 2 coaches before me at Bowdon, Dwight Hostetler, the guy had 300 and something wins. He was at Bowdon forever. And you don't see that as much now. If you've got a coach that's been tenured for 8 or 9 years, that's a long time in this era. 15 is you rarely see guys that do that in this era. And it's the same with players. It used to be wherever you grew up, that's where you played. And if somebody moved in, you may get that once in a 10-year period where now I think everyone's a little more transient, kind of looking at, hey, what's a better fit for me? So those are some big changes, in the last few years. And then, of course, I don't know what we're doing in this reclass playoff stuff. It used to be, you had your region, and the top 4 teams got out. And, of course, now we're looking at power rankings. We're looking at more classifications. We're looking at now, going, I feel like we changed the way that we do the playoffs every 2 years, in this modern era of football, instead of just, hey, let's do something, for 3 or 4 cycles in a row. And if we don't like it, then make some changes. But I feel like every 2 years we change something up. That frustrates me a little bit sometimes. But those are the big changes.
Well, over the years, who are some of the guys that you have enjoyed competing against the most? Some of the coaches that you just, whether it's you enjoy whipping them or they've whipped you, or they're just people that you just genuinely enjoy looking across the field and enjoy talking to them before the game, or giving them a hug after the game, or, stuff like that guys you've just enjoyed competing against over the years?
All right. Well, the first one that comes to mind is Scott Peavy. And he is I'm 0-3 against the guy, so I enjoy competing against him. Can't say that we beat him. He has the toughest freaking kids on the planet, no matter where he's coaching. I thought he did a great job at Haralson County. I think he's a heck of a coach. He's a great weight room guy. But, man, on Friday nights, you knew you were about to get hit by his kids for 4 quarters, whether you were up or down. And I have a lot of respect for teams that are very physical football teams. So he's been fun. I've gotten a friendship with Coach Alford at Sly County, the last 3 or 4 years. And, we had 2 of the greatest football games to ever coach in. We played for the state championship in 2022, and it was a 39-31 game. Then we met the next year in the semifinals, and it was a 35-31 game. It really came down to who had the ball last, and just 2 great football games. Obviously, Rooster Russell's another guy. I think he does as good a job, coaching the talent he has. He can coach. His teams are going to be better than they should be, regardless of what his talent level is each year. That's been a fun rivalry. It's one of the oldest. I found out it's older than the Northside Warner Robins rivalry, the Bremen Bowdon rivalry. So that's been an extremely fun, fun game to coach in. When I was an assistant at Heard County, loved playing, coaching against Pete Wiggins. I think the world of Pete, and that was a big Pulpwood Classic rivalry game, and a lot of good players on the field. And that series rivalry is pretty even. I'm not sure what the number is right now, but it's pretty even. 1 or 2 losses for one team. That's the advantage right now. But always great games. Always for a region championship. Always something on the line. And now the rivalry that's growing at Bowdon is the Bowdon Herd rivalry, and that's Coach Shane Lassiter, the Kerbo brothers, and Tim Bayer, and they're all back at Herd, and it's fun to coach against guys that were your mentor and guys that were your friends and your buddies. That game has become really, really fun, and this past season was really fun because we felt like we got to play against the best Class A historic region in football. We had to go clinch Irwin and Brooks, 3 consecutive weeks to win it. And, before we won the title, I think that region won 7 straight titles in Class A football. Somebody from that region, whether it be Clinch, Irwin, or Brooks. So it was really fun to coach against those historic teams. And probably the biggest crowd, biggest gate, and the biggest game environment I've ever coached in was the semifinal game 2 years ago, which brought back kind of a rematch from the 2000s and the 90s. It was us versus Lincoln County at Bowdon. And those are 2 names synonymous for playing deep. Both had great football programs in the 90s, the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And when we played, that football game, Larry Campbell was in attendance. He came to watch Lincoln play us 2 years ago. And, that was a 40,000 gate for a Class A school. I mean, it was slam packed, probably the loudest, best environment I've ever gotten to coach in ever. Their side was packed. The fence was packed. We had to bring in barricades. Probably the biggest crowd at a Bowdon football game in the history of Bowdon. So those are some of the fun ones.
Well, that's awesome, Coach. And I know that you're going to continue to do great things at Bowdon and keep on winning. You got a chance at a historic season this year, and I know those kids are lifting weights and getting stronger, and I love watching you promote them on the internet. I don't know if it's you or Coach Morgan, and I appreciate the fact that y'all share with everybody. Y'all are very approachable, very open. If I've reached out to Coach Morgan and myself and said, hey, man, can you share, what are some things, pick your brain about some things. Y'all are great about doing that with folks, and I'm real appreciative that, people still do that. You'll clinic people. Some people try to guard their secrets and stuff, and that's awesome. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Man, I appreciate that you even thought to ask me to be on here. You've been one of my favorite dudes for a long time, and we talked about your big dissertation years ago. Caught my eye, and I thought it was one of the greatest pieces I've ever read. If I could put it in the libraries with some of the greatest authors, I would put that piece in there. I tell people all the time that's where I fell in love with this man, reading his little paper he wrote back in early 2000s. But honored to be on here, and as you get older, you start thinking what you can give back to the profession, and you think about all the guys who gave you 5 minutes of their time to teach you something when you were younger. And, I definitely want to leave the profession better than I found it.
Well, Coach, you're definitely doing that and pointing to the young people that you've come across over the years, whether it be in the weight room or on the football field, and we sure do appreciate it. And I sure do appreciate you coming down to Orlando and speaking to the guys, even though it took you 3 days to get down there. I apologize for that, and I do appreciate you coming down and doing that for us, and I appreciate you coming on
the legends
with us tonight.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.